Okay, I want to thank everybody for coming out to the Hare Krishna temple tonight. Everything that I say tonight is inspired by the teachings of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, the founder of Chari of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Om Agnanatimirarisham Yanajana Shalakaya Shakshurun Militam Hina Tajmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Hina Bhutale Swayam Rupakadamayam Tarati Svapadantikam. Okay, today I want to talk about the juncture of volunteering and devotional service. What's the difference between volunteering for mundane material purposes and what is devotional service to God? Yesterday we had about 200 volunteers from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints who volunteered on this property, and they got a lot of work done within one morning. And we're very appreciative of all of that work. We have a big property here, and it takes a lot of work, and there's only so many devotees to go around. So we need to adopt more devotees from the community to work with us. The first time I came to this temple was about 20 years ago, over 20 years ago. I came here for a Llama festival. I had no idea what I was getting into. I didn't even know there was a temple here. I just thought there was llamas. When I saw there was a temple, I was attracted to it immediately. It's so beautiful, very attractive. I came up these steps and I came in this room and I was just amazed. And I had no idea what any of it meant. I just knew that it was beautiful and it was something that I wanted to be a part of in one way or another. Somehow or another, we ended up downstairs washing dishes. I'm pretty sure Vaibhavi had something to do with that, but I didn't know Vaibhavi at the time. But we were washing dishes. That was the first volunteer service that I ever did in this temple. 20 years later, I came back to Utah. I lived in a lot of different places. I lived in South America. I lived in different states across the country. Came back to Utah for a good job opportunity, and I knew that I wanted to volunteer. I had volunteered in a lot of different places that I'd been at. I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Bolivia. I'd been a missionary in Brazil. I was an Eagle Scout. So I had a lot of volunteer experience in my life, and I knew that if I was going to feel comfortable in this community again, then I needed to volunteer. I needed to find a way so that I could give back to the community. My volunteerism over the years has been largely motivated by humanitarianism. That's why I joined the Peace Corps. Idealism, a sense of altruism, even a sense of nationalism. Right? I wanted to serve my country. I wanted to serve my church. I did a lot of that volunteering with this idea of making the world a better place. So I saw online that I could volunteer at this Hare Krishna temple. I went to a website. I was getting into environmentalism, and I got onto this website, Worldwide Opportunities on Organic Farms, and I saw south of Spanish Fork, Utah is a semi-rural environment. We have 15 acres upon which sit a gorgeous temple, a 6,000-foot residential facility, and comfortable double rooms, 2 outdoor stages, a large covered pavilion, and amenities for parrots, peacocks, llamas, and small cows. That sounded pretty exciting. I was looking for a place to volunteer, and I thought, peacocks and small cows sounds good to me. So I came here to work, to volunteer. The first day that I came here to volunteer, I didn't really know what I was supposed to do. I worked in a volunteer center for a while at a university, and that was the constant mantra that I was always hearing at service projects is, what are we supposed to be doing? And that's kind of where I was at. What am I supposed to be doing here? What is my purpose for being here? Well, somebody soon gave me a broom and said, your purpose right now is to sweep. So I swept. I started doing some cleanup work around the temple. That led me to some deeper investigation as to what the purpose of this temple is. I got a Bhagavad Gita, and I was reading through it. I was hearing from Charu Das, who I had met online, actually, before I came here. And he was giving these beautiful lectures online that were teaching this wonderful philosophy about service. I couldn't quite get my head around it, but I knew that there was something there. I was very impressed by the way the people here lived. And so I started hearing. And our scriptures tell us that hearing is the very first step in devotional service, in getting from that place of just volunteering for humanitarian causes to hearing the words, the transcendental sound vibration that can connect you with God through devotional service. So some of the things that I was hearing were from the Bhagavad Gita. One of the main concepts in the Bhagavad Gita is this idea of modes of material nature. We all come down here into this material world and we get entangled in what's called Tama, Raja, and Sattva, or ignorance, passion, and goodness. Ignorance is that state of being where you're just lazy, you want things to come to you easily, you want your senses to be satisfied, eat, drink, and be merry. And this is the type of attitude that people have when they're not really excited about life, they just want to feel good and be comfortable all the time. That's not a very spiritual place to come from. Okay, so what happens to people like that is eventually they get a little bit of gumption in them. They're going to say, I'm not feeling very satisfied by this lifestyle I'm living. I'm going to do some work and see if I can get some results from that work. And they do. They have results. They get some fruit from that work, and they enjoy the fruit of their work. And so they work a little bit harder to get more fruit. And they like that, and so they take more and more and more and more and more, and then they're never satisfied. They just always try to find happiness and just working harder and harder and harder to get more and more and more material gratification. So eventually people like that get to this stage where they say, okay, I'm not satisfied by doing nothing. I'm not satisfied by working for things. There must be a higher purpose. And so they look around. Oftentimes they end up in a church or a synagogue or a different, a place or a temple like this, and they start seeing people that are living a good life. They see people that are following commandments, they're following regulations, and they're getting results from that. These are studious people, they're clean people, they're family-centered people generally, they're nice to their neighbors, all of those things that we would learn in a church or a temple. So that's the mode of goodness. And that's the platform that most religion is teaching us to get to, is to be good people. Pure goodness, though, is transcendental to even the type of goodness that we can get from living a good life and getting good results from that. Pure goodness is pure devotional service to God. It's love. Goodness that we oftentimes associate with living a good life is tinged always with a little bit of passion. There's always some sort of a transactional relationship with God. It's, I'll be good so that I can go to heaven, or so that I can live the results in this lifetime of having a good family life in this lifetime. That's a good platform to be at. But there's something transcendental. So let's take our theme for today of service. You can do anything in these three different modes. So thinking about service in the modes, if you're serving in the mode of ignorance, you're just serving yourself. You're self-centered. You're doing things so that you can get things out of it. If you're serving out of passion, you're doing work. You're probably serving a boss so that you can get a paycheck. Or you're serving the economy in general. So you might have even larger ambitions, and you're doing it out of service to humanity in terms of economic development. But this type of service only gets you so far. And so when you start going to, you start trying to be good, trying to get to this level of goodness, service out of goodness looks a lot more like helping your neighbor. Coming to the Hare Krishna temple on a Saturday and helping out with the yard work. Okay, this is mode of goodness. Transcendental service is service purely out of love of God. Now, you may be doing that good service transcendentally. It doesn't need to be something that ties you to this material world. It can be something that elevates you to a transcendental position. Or you can be doing it out of, I want a reward. I'll be good to other people so that people are good to me, or some other reward for it. Or you can say, I'm not serving anyone unless I get a paycheck. Or you can say, I'm not doing anything, I just want to be served. Those are the different modes in which you can do service. So it all depends on who you're serving and what the purpose is. In a scripture we have called the Ishopanishad, Srila Prabhupada, our teacher, gave us this purport. He says, this literature can regulate the working energy of a human being in such a way that he can gradually realize the authority of the Supreme Being. When he realizes the authority of the personality of Godhead, Vasudeva or Krishna, it is to be understood that he has attained the stage of positive knowledge. In this purified stage, the modes of nature, namely goodness, passion, and ignorance, cannot act. Such work does not bind one to the cycle of birth and death. In the lower stages of life, one cannot immediately adopt the activities of devotional service, nor can one completely stop fruit of work. A conditioned soul is accustomed to working for sense gratification, for his own selfish interests, immediate or extended. An ordinary man works for his own sense enjoyment, and when this principle of sense enjoyment is extended to include his society, nation, or humanity in general, it assumes various attractive names, such as altruism, socialism, communism, nationalism, humanitarianism. If one actually wants to live for any of the above isms, he should make them God-centered. There is no harm in becoming a family man, or an altruist, a socialist, a communist, a nationalist, or a humanitarian, provided that one executes his activities in relation with Ishavasya, the God-centered conception. A humble, God-centered life is more valuable than a colossal hoax of a life dedicated to godless altruism or socialism. So the missing ingredient in all of those types of service, if we're doing it for an altruistic or humanitarian purpose, is God-centeredness. If we're doing any of that type of service with God at the center, then we're doing it in service to God as well. So another thing from the Bhagavad Gita that the Bhagavad Gita explains is 3 different aspects of God. It's important to understand who God is so that we can understand who we are, so that we can understand our relationship with God. The first aspect of God is called the Paramatma. This is God within the heart. If you're looking at that mountain over there, you have one perspective from this vantage point. But if you go up the canyon and look at that same mountain, you have a different perspective of the same mountain. You have a very different idea of what that mountain is. So this first aspect is the Paramatma. This is God within our heart. Many faith traditions might call this the Holy Ghost. So God within our heart. Within our heart, there's 2 souls. We have our own soul, and we have what's called the super soul. Our own soul is here enjoying. The super soul is observing. Once we pay attention to the super soul, then we can align with the purpose of the super soul, and we can live a more God-centered life in that way. The next aspect of God is Brahman. Brahman is the energy of God. So if the sun is shining brightly and you feel it on your head, you might say something like, the sun is on my head. The sun is not actually on your head, the sun is out in outer space, but you can feel the energy of the sun, and there's no difference between the energy of the sun and its source. Okay, so if God's energy pervades the entire universe, you might say God is that energy, and you'd be correct. But that energy has a source. And we believe that that source is Bhagavan. Bhagavan is the personal aspect of God. God in his original personal form. And we can have a loving devotional relationship with a person. So understanding God in that personal form is important in this concept of devotional service. But from the Paramatma stage, let's go back to the God is in the heart of every living being. If you recognize that God is in your own heart, and you develop a loving devotional relationship with God within your own heart, you're going to start recognizing that God is in the heart of every other living being as well. It says, Vidya Vinaya Sampane Brahmane Gavi Hashtani Shuni Chaiva Kushava Pakacha Pandita Samadarshinaha. The scripture means that the wise sage realizes God within his heart, and then he recognizes that God's in the heart of the animals, the plants, the trees, other human beings, every living entity. And so you don't want to do violence to other living entities because the God that you love that's in your heart is in their heart as well. And so you don't want to do that violence. So that's one of the reasons that we're vegetarian and that we reverence trees and other living entities within the environment. That's what attracted me to the temple in the first place, is this nature-centered idea of spirituality. But if you understand that God, the original source of the Paramatma, which is expanded in each of our hearts, the original source of that energy that pervades the universe, the spiritual and material energies, is a personal aspect of God, then you can start to develop a personal relationship with God. But it all depends on our intention and our desire. It depends on who we're trying to serve. If our intention is to serve ourselves, then we start thinking of ourselves as God. We start thinking, I'm the Lord of everything that I survey, and therefore I want to be served. I deserve to be served. And with that kind of attitude, your desires become very mundane, become very materialistic. If your desire is that loving devotional connection with God, then your intention changes. Any service that you do becomes God-centered and becomes devotional service. If you take two people in a factory, one of them's pushing a button all day long as his job, and the guy next to him's doing the exact same thing. One guy's doing it so that he can get his paycheck, so that he can go out partying on the weekend. He's doing that out of ignorance. The guy next to him's doing the exact same work, doing the very same motions, but his intention is different. He's going to take that money home to provide for a God-centered family. That is in the mode of goodness or even transcendental devotional service. Okay, so how can you approach God? I don't know everybody's consciousness in this room or everybody's experience. I know that there's some pretty God-fearing people here. But I've never seen God face to face. I don't know if any of you have. Most of us haven't. How can we serve someone, even if we know that he's a person? How can we serve him if we can't actually see him in this material sense? How can you approach God in this way? Well, the way that we do it in this temple is by serving a servant of God. Or not just a servant, but a servant of 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 God. It's very difficult to get direct access to God, but it's much easier to find somebody that's serving God and to serve them. Okay, so when I first started coming to the temple, not the first time with the Lama Festival, but the second time, when I met some devotees here, I met these two gentlemen right here, Charu Das and Agnidev Das. Das means servant of God. So Charu is the name of God, which means beautiful. So servant of God. And Agni is another form of God, of fire, that accepts the sacrifices that we give to God. So I started listening to these people, and I started serving here in the temple. Bhavi Mataji gave me a lot of guidance in that regard. Because I could see that they had a vision. They had an understanding that was definitely not ignorant, not even passionate. They weren't doing this to make money. It wasn't even just good. They were beyond good. They seemed transcendental. So I saw that aspect in them, and I said, okay, I want to learn a little bit how they got to that point, and so I'm going to serve them. And so that's why I started doing some devotional service here in the temple. That led me to several trips to India. I met another spiritual master, another teacher that I started serving. And this was a way that I was able to connect in a service attitude to this lineage. In this other picture here, you see Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur. The teacher of Charu and Agni was Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada's teacher was Bhaktisiddhanta. Bhaktisiddhanta had a teacher that went back, Bhaktivinoda, that went back and back and back, 5,000 years back to Krishna in an unbroken line of disciplic succession from guru to disciple, guru to disciple, guru to disciple. I wanted to see if I could get into that chain somehow. And the only way to do that was to do some service. If I came in here just all proud and said, hey, I want what you got, how much is it? Or just give it to me, or get mad and come in here all angry and say, I want that. That would be in the mode of ignorance. If I wanted to pay for it, that would be in the mode of passion. Mode of goodness, well, you got to do some service, get on that platform then. And then maybe, hopefully, I'm I'm advancing to that transcendental stage where I can develop some love of God. So there's a difference between religious practice and belief, though. When you go to a temple like this and you start practicing some sort of religious, spiritual tradition, you make a distinction between belief and practice. In the West, often we talk about beliefs. If you meet somebody from a different church or a different religion, you would say, well, what do you believe? And that's how the conversation usually starts there. Belief is important, but the truth is the truth, whatever the truth is. Whatever we believe about it may help us in our spiritual journey, or it may just be mental speculation within our own minds. But what is your practice? In the East, they often say, what is your spiritual practice to connect to that truth? What do you do to, do you use a mantra? Do you use meditation? Do you pray? What is your spiritual practice to connect with that truth? Now, some of the practices and the spirituality, well, religion is like a school, right? You go to the institution to learn what they have to teach you. But what all religions that have love of God at the center are trying to teach us is this spontaneous love of God. That's what religion is meant to teach us, is this spirituality, this spontaneous love of God. But we got to do some practice before we get there. We're not just going to come in and be experts on the first day. Just because we have that desire needs to be developed into actual skills. So we practice. We learn to associate and love others by serving. We recognize God in the heart of every other living being. We learn to serve. We learn to keep rules and regulations. We learn to be consistent. We learn to do our duties, but offer the fruits of those duties to God instead of offering them to ourselves. And we learn to chant God's names in devotion. You may have noticed at the beginning we started with this chanting and we said the same thing over and over and over and over again. Those were different names of God. Within every spiritual tradition, they teach that God's names have a spiritual potency. Within Christianity, for example, we say, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Right? So God's name in every spiritual tradition has a spiritual potency. God has many names. There's Allah, there's Adonai, there's Elohim, there's Hare, there's Krishna, there's Rama. These are all names of God. And if we chant them in devotion, it helps us as a spiritual practice. It's a mantra. Man means mind. Tra means a tool to deliver the mind. So it's a tool that helps us deliver our mind so that we're thinking constantly about our relationship with God. But spontaneity, this spirituality, this goal that we're trying to get to requires practice. Take a jazz musician that, they're playing their jazz music and they're just making it up as they go. And they're playing off of each other. And this spontaneity creates this beautiful music. I don't have that type of spontaneity with in any musical instrument. If I were to get up there without the practice, then it wouldn't sound as nice. Somebody else, like Krishna Prastaya or Jai Krishna here, can get up there and they can just spontaneously play this beautiful music. Spontaneity in religious life also requires some practice. We do practices of chanting. We do practices of serving here in the temple. There's so many practices that you can learn so that you can get to this spontaneity, this spontaneous, loving devotional service. So service in the mode of goodness, love thy neighbor as thyself, this is the essence of religious practice. This gets us to the good platform. You can't get to transcendental unless you're already on the good platform. So if you're on that platform where you're serving others, even if you're doing it out of a sense of reward, but you're doing the practice, you're practicing because you're not perfect yet. But eventually you'll get to that perfect love of God. Your service will turn into something more transcendental, and you'll have a loving devotional service attitude. Your intention, your desire is aligned with God's intention and desire for you, and your loving devotional relationship with him is not of a transactional mood, but it's out of a loving devotional service. So in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 12, there's a ladder. There's some steps. It says in text 8, just fix your mind upon me, this is God speaking, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and engage all of your intelligence in me. Thus you will live in me always, without a doubt. So that's the spontaneous, loving devotional service. Your mind is fixed on God spontaneously in loving devotional service. But he says, my dear Arjuna, O winner of wealth, if you cannot fix your mind on me, so if you're not perfect yet, check, me, without deviation, then follow the regulative principles of bhakti yoga. So the regulative principles is get on the mode of goodness, follow the regulative principles, follow the commandments. Find some people that know how to connect with God and follow their instructions. That looks a lot like religion, but the point of it is to get you to that spirituality, that spontaneous devotional service. But then Krishna says, if you cannot practice the regulations of bhakti yoga, so if you can't even follow what they teach you at church, then just try to work for me, because by working for me, you will come to the perfect stage. Okay, so I'm not perfect. I'm not even really religious. But I do like going to the Hare Krishna temple to work in the gardens. Or I do like to do, service for religious purposes, even though, I'm not perfect. But he says, however, if you are unable to work in this consciousness of me, then act giving up all results of your work and try to be self-situated. So he says, okay, if you're not able to even, serve within a religious context, then just act giving up all results of your work. Do volunteer work. Do that humanitarianism. Do that altruism. Do any sort of service. At least that gets you to a good platform. And he says, if you cannot take up this practice, then engage yourself in the cultivation of knowledge. Okay, so if you're not even able to volunteer or do anything, at least read a book. Read some scripture. Try to learn how to connect. But better than knowledge, however, is meditation. Better than meditation is renunciation of the fruits of action. For by such renunciation, one can attain peace of mind. So there's these different levels. So whatever level that you're volunteering at, the level that I was volunteering at in the Peace Corps was one of those lower rungs. But it taught me the value of volunteerism, of service. When I came to the temple the first time and got a broom in my hand, I was really just after the volunteerism. I just wanted to be connected to my community in a way. I wasn't trying to necessarily connect with God in the ways that I learned later that I could through this bhakti yoga process. There's a story in a book called the Chaitanya Charitamrita, in which an incarnation of God, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, is cleaning the Gundicha temple. He gets hundreds of volunteers, actually, to help him clean the temple. They clean everything. They get pots of water. It says they have hundreds of volunteers just carrying water back and forth from the pond to the temple so that they can clean. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gives each one of them a little broom so that they can go out and they can do this service. It says they clean the whole temple, and they even clean the yard of the temple. So I was thinking, well, that's a lot like the kind of service that we were doing yesterday, cleaning the yard of the temple. The only difference in volunteerism or devotional service is, what is your motivation for doing that? If I came because I wanted to, I probably wouldn't be on the temple doing sweeping or anything if I was in the mode of ignorance. I probably just wouldn't even come to the temple. If I was in the mode of passion, I would say, okay, I did some work. Now I want to get paid. This is what my work was worth. Please pay me. Or if I'm doing it on the mode of goodness, I can say, I just want to help out my neighbor because I want to be a good person, and this is a good thing to do. Or you can be doing it on a transcendental level and say, I'm serving because I love God, and I know that God is in the heart of every other living being. I just want to do something where I can connect, get that connection to God. I'm not doing it because I want to go to heaven. I'm happy going to a hellish situation in my next life, as long as I've got that connection to God. I'm happy going into a heavenly situation in my next lifetime, as long as I've got that connection to God. But really, my mind is equipoised because I've been doing practices. I've followed a teacher who's taught me these rules and regulations. I've maintained a steady mind. And so therefore, any service that I do, I can see the reflection. I can see those facets of God in the world. And I just want to serve because of that love that I have for God. So if any of these things resonated with you in any way or helped you with your God consciousness, please raise your hands with me and repeat with me. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Now we'll all stand up and we can move the chairs to the side, and we're going to do an arti ceremony where we offer the elements of the earth to the deities.